The Iran deal is coming up. It's probably another month or so, and you're going to see what I do. But Iran has not been treating that part of the world or the world itself appropriately. A lot of bad things are happening in Iran. The deal is coming up in 1 month, and you will see what happens. Okay?
Your Royal Highness, should the president pull out of the Iran deal?
Well, we'll talk about that today.
There you have it. The Iran deal, a focus of discussions, as you can tell, between President Trump and Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, at the White House today. In fact, the Crown Prince is going to be in the U.S. for a couple of weeks. It's a big mission for him. But more importantly, with the threat of Saudi Arabia adding nuclear weapons to its arsenal, which it says it may do, how does this meeting impact the president's decision regarding that Iran nuclear deal when it comes up for renewal, or at least the end of it, next month? Let's bring in former U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia and author of Desert Diplomat, Ambassador John Jordan, and Foundation for Defense of Democracies founder and President Cliff May. Thank you, gentlemen, both for being here. Ambassador, let me begin with you. Let me just say that, listen, we heard the two leaders there saying we're going to be talking about this. How's this going to play out? It's clear from what President Trump said, he does not believe Iran is playing fair, and that quite likely he's going to just pull out and say this is not going to work. I think that's what the Saudi Arabians want to hear. How do you see this playing out?
Well, I do think President Trump is likely to withdraw from the nuclear agreement. He says they're not playing fair. I think by that he really can't mean adhering to the agreement, so he must mean some of the mischief they are invoking in the region, as well as perhaps what he would call the spirit of the deal. But it sounds to me as if he is ready to pull out, and I certainly think the Saudis would support that.
Cliff, let me get to you. It seems to me, with regard to Iran, there's a proxy war, several proxy wars already going on between Saudi Arabia and Iran in Syria and Yemen. The way this thing is going, to me, it feels like it's escalating. What's your view?
Well, it is, and I think what the Saudi Crown Prince is going to make very clear to President Trump is that the Iranians have hegemonic imperialist ambitions in the region, that Iran, with its current leadership, is a threat, even an existential threat to the Saudis, that if Iran goes ahead and acquires nuclear weapons, the Saudis will follow, and then other nations will follow suit as well. And as for the agreement, it's likely that the Saudis think it best to terminate it, but they also might be willing to see it fixed. There's an effort underway with the Europeans taking the lead to try to fix what are the three really fatal flaws in this agreement. The sunset clauses, which open a path for an Iranian nuclear weapon, the ballistic missiles that can carry nuclear weapons, which are still being tested, and, of course, the fact that we are not inspecting, the international inspectors are not inspecting military sites, as if military sites would never be a place to develop military weapons. There is a chance that this agreement can be fixed, but if not, I think the Saudis will say, we got to terminate it. It's not in our interest, it's not in the interest of the region, and it's not in the U.S. interest.
Ambassador, let me get back to the Crown Prince, who really is shaking things up, to say the least. He's only 32. He's going to be around a long time. Saudi Arabia has traditionally been the gentle giant in the Middle East, but it seems that that may change. It's being heard a lot louder now under the Crown Prince. Will the ultra-conservatives in Saudi Arabia, I know he's kind of created his position, the Crown Prince, and he's eliminated rivals. How open is Saudi Arabia to the kind of change that the Crown Prince wants?
Well, let's remember that 70% of Saudi Arabia is under the age of 30, so it's really a nation of kids. The old guard are slipping away. Many of them have been silenced, some have been detained, and a number of the religious extremists have also been imprisoned. So the Crown Prince has come in with a very strong hand right now. I'm sure there are many in the royal family unhappy with him in the old guard, but he's installed a number of his younger cousins into deputy positions in the governance around the country and into the ministries. And so I think he is finding a way to consolidate power, and he'll be very hard to push aside.
Yes, he certainly will. Cliff, let me get back to you for a final question. Look, the Crown Prince has compared Iran's Ayatollah Khomeini to Hitler. They're cooperating with the Israelis, sharing intelligence and cooperating in other areas. I never thought I'd see that. I mean, they've been such enemies. How does, given his stance and his very strong stance, and he's kind of like President Trump in some ways, that he's come in and really shaken things up, how does it change the dynamics overall in the Middle East? And is it a concern, or will the dust finally settle?
Well, the dynamics in the Middle East have been changing and are changing rapidly. And I would say that the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, is responding to that and saying we can't be stagnant in any way. We can't be stagnant in terms of our defensive postures, in terms of understanding who our allies may be, who our enemies are, with whom we have common enemies. The Israelis and the Saudis have a common enemy in the Islamic Republic of Iran. And at home, I think you're right. He's being dynamic. He's not a democratizer, but he's a modernizer and a reformer. He understands that the economy of Saudi Arabia needs to evolve, needs to change if the nation is to survive. He understands the stakes are really high for the survival of this nation over the next 25, 50 years. And he's doing a lot. He's a young man in a hurry in order to make the changes he thinks are necessary for a Middle East that I think is a better Middle East for the U.S. than the one that the theocrats in Tehran have in mind.
Well, it's fascinating to watch it all unfold. Thank you so much, Ambassador Robert Jordan. I think I called you John Jordan or Dave Jordan before. I'm so sorry. Ambassador Robert Jordan, appreciate you being here. And Cliff May as well. Thank you. Thank you both, gentlemen, for joining us today.